I'm in the Sonoran Desert today, and in low elevation flat areas of deserts like this one and the Mojave, there's usually one plant that dominates the landscape, the creosote bush. This couple foot tall bush is also referred to as chaparral and greasewood, and in Spanish it's referred to as gobernadona, which means governess, and hediondilla, which means the smelly one. Now, these names hint at some of the really strong characteristics of the creosote bush, and that is its chemistry. It's known for these waxy, resinous leaves and a really strong smell that it puts off, especially after desert rains. It makes the whole desert smell like this. Because of these qualities, it's also been referred to as a chemical factory. And it's those chemicals that actually make this plant interesting. It's what has made a lot of people think that this plant is a cure or at least treatment for lots of different diseases, like 50 different diseases. The question is that true? You see, the resin and the smell are all related to chemical compounds in this plant that make it one of the most hardy of desert survivors. It's been suggested by various sources and authors that the creosote bush can be used to treat a long list of diseases. For instance, the list includes acne, allergies, bacterial infections, fungal infections, viruses, arthritis, colds and bronchitis, burns and bites such as from snakes, diabetes, liver disease, kidney and gallbladder stones, headache, cramps, menstrual pains, sterility, tuberculosis, ulcers, UTIs, and a long list of many more. Now, much of the research was done throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and there's been some experiments since then too to try to isolate the chemical compounds from the creosote bush to assess their medical significance. The results are still a little inconclusive, but what has been found out is that certain chemical compounds in this bush strongly exhibit antibiotic and anti-inflammatory properties. And that's what makes it so special medically. And that's especially true for one of its most notable compounds, northihydroguaretic acid, or NDGA. I know, it's quite a mouthful. It's also been labeled as a potent antioxidant, and it's been isolated and studied for its interesting properties, along with a handful of other isolated lignans in the plant. Now, NDGA is actually found throughout the plant, in the twigs, the leaves, and the flowers. These compounds are what's responsible for the plant's interesting life strategies and its smell and bitter taste. But that hasn't stopped people for a really long time from using this plant medicinally. In fact, the Pima have used this for lots of different diseases, and also it's been put in a tea to drink, and nowadays it's also being used in pill and tablet form. Actually, did you know that NDGA was used as a food antioxidant in the US? It was approved by the US War Food Administration in 1943. And it's also been used for a whole host of other industrial applications, preserving natural fibers and also remediation, and has a whole lot of other uses I'll talk about in some other discussions here. But for now, I just want to focus on the applicability to medicinal and health. Unfortunately, since then, in the 1970s, the FDA banned the use of creosote bush because of toxicity reports. Now, some people think that these toxicity claims are a bit over-exaggerated. I mean, there is one case at least of a woman who was drinking it so often that she did have a toxic response, but that might just be a case of a little too much, a little too often. But there are some other cases of toxicity as well, and therefore it's at least plausible that some of the chemicals in creosote bush are also responsible for toxicity, at least in high doses. It does include this whole host of compounds, lignans, tannins, etc., many of which are indicted for these kind of anti-life strategies, right? So things that deter herbivory and plant growth around the creosote bush. But that hasn't stopped people from wanting to tap into this kind of fountain of youth plant with its treasure box of antioxidants that they want to get to. People drink teas. It's referred to as chaparral tea, and in Mexico, agua de uso. They use it as tinctures and salves, and it's also been put into pill and tablet form. Now, it's the pill and tablet form that might be the real issue here, because that's where we get into trouble with overdosing and having too much of the chemicals and having toxicity issues. Again, it might just be a case of too much of a good thing, or we could just go by the old saying, everything in moderation. Two of the main issues that keep coming up in studies of creosote bush compounds have to do with issues with the liver and renal issues. Now, we know that in that example, the main case for the renal issues and some of the other issues that the lady had to do with her drinking too much of the tea. In that case, she was drinking 3 to 4 cups a day for like 3 months. So certainly it's a case of having too much of it. And if she was having it in low doses, she might not have had the issue. She ended up with like kidney cysts and some other renal issues associated directly with the compounds she was drinking. So again, looks like maybe a case of too much. But then there's a lot of positive reports too coming out of some of the studies. In low doses, it looks like it may actually be really useful medicinally. Some of the research that was done tested their sample size with low doses in both oral and topical applications, and they found that they didn't see liver damage in their patients. So from this research, it's been concluded that taking this stuff in capsule form is problematic and likely could lead to overdosing on too much of the creosote bush chemicals, and therefore that's where the toxicity could come from. So capsule form is to be avoided. But in folk medicine, this has been used as a treatment for type 2 diabetes for a really long time, and there may actually be some value to that because some of the research has also shown that these isolated compounds do in fact lower blood sugar levels. So there may be something to that. And there is some initial evidence that it may contribute to helping with aging, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, inflammatory and autoimmune diseases like rheumatism, lupus, diabetes. It also might contribute to AIDS, respiratory syndromes, maybe even things like SARS or COVID. Now, we don't know for sure, but this is what the potential looks like in studies, which are still at a preliminary level. There's still more research to be done, and that's why we need to be careful if we're considering consuming creosote compounds for medicinal reasons. But at least for now, it has been shown that it may offer some help and some therapy for a whole host of diseases that it's been used traditionally for. And the antioxidant properties, which have been found in NDGA, would support this success, along with all the other lignans that have been studied and show some antioxidant properties.